Erotic store employees, what are some interesting stories, excuses people have given when buying toys, equipment? NSFW. Not me, but a buddy of mine worked at a smut shop for a few years a long time ago. He's got tons of stories, but my favorite one was when he was working and this older guy came to buy a bunch of gay porn and rent some gay videos. I told you it was a long time ago. After the guy paid, he left and went home. Called the store and asked for my friend by description. My buddy answered and the guy said he'd give him $40 for his underwear. I asked him, well, what the hell did you do? I stripped those bastards off in the bathroom, threw them in a plastic bag, and gave them to that idiot for $40. He never saw the guy again, and he has some more awesome stories about other people, but I always liked this one. Guess it's time I told some of my stories too. Back when I was in college, I needed a job and no one would hire me because I lacked experience, and at that time, if you applied to McDonald's, you had over 50 other college students applying, so I couldn't get anything. Then I saw an ad in the paper's store clerk. I went to apply and yes, it was my first time stepping into an adult store. Got hired right away. They paid $10 per hour plus commission. That was great for the time. It was early 90s. Story 1. Had a guy come in from the bar next door complaining to me about how he just couldn't get laid. He's ranting to me about how in Mexico, he'd only need to spend $20 to get laid but not here. Kept going on and on, so I said there's gotta be at least one girl who would sleep with you, right? Just keep looking. Then he looks at me seriously and says, no, I'm talking about young Latino guys. Don't get me wrong, I'm not gay. I hate gays. I'm just into Latino guys. Story 2. Guy comes in, buys a penis pump, rents one of our video viewing rooms. They can rent a video and then rent a room, and I'd put the video on so they can watch it in that room. After the video was done, he brought the used penis pump back out and asked for a refund. Story 3. Guy comes in, looks at the dirty magazines. I'm watching him from the counter. After a couple, I see him stick his hands under his sweater and pulls it down. Clearly he had hidden something under his sweater, so I go out and asked him to please put back the magazine. He kept saying he's not stealing any magazines, so I said no. I saw you looking at our magazine, then put it under your sweater. Pull out your hands and let's see. His hands were still under his sweater too. Finally he says I was not stealing anything. I was trying to hide my hard-on. Pulls his hands out and sure enough he's pitching a tent and nothing else was under his sweater. I had to apologize. Story 4. There was this lady who brought her 70-year-old mother in to get something. The mother was going out on a date. It's been a while since she's been on a date. They asked me what's a good toy that a couple could use together. We had this thing that was a long bar with a fleshlight on one end and a vibrating dildo on the other. It's been sitting on the shelf for a long time because it was so expensive, so I told them this was our most popular product for couples and this was the last one. They bought it. On a side note, I was somewhat truthful since that was our only item for couples in the entire store, so obviously there was nothing for couples that would have been more popular. Story 5. Had a trans lady come into the store a couple of times with different guys. Then one time she comes in with this one guy. They go behind one of our video stands and she goes down on him. No one was around and I was in shock. I didn't know what to do, so I just let them finish. Customer here. Had an awkward conversation with the poor gal behind the counter. I was looking for a good male massager, but wanted to know if she had any good recommendations. I was previously ripped off through some recommendations online that turned out to be cheap Chinese pieces of junk. The product page is artificially bolstered by botnets and fake reviews. The most pleasure the device gave me was the comedy gold of its English instruction booklet. So I wanted a human's perspective. Somebody who actually handles these kinds of things on the daily. Something that won't die after a month. I trust your judgment over internet reviews. Tried a couple recommended products online, and got burned both times. Oh wow, she reels in surprise. I'm sorry to hear that. Did you have to see a doctor? If there's one thing I love about sex shop workers, they have a fantastic way to not make me feel like the most awkward person in the room. Bless her heart. I was tempted to leave them a 5-star Google Guides review using my real email address, to really emphasize how grateful I was. One of my first jobs was at a video store VHS rental store that had an adult section. As I was like 16 at the time, I was not allowed to be in that section to restock, but I could rent them out. I was also tasked with calling up customers that had overdue tapes. Normally this was fine. If you got an answering machine, you would just say you have an adult title that is overdue. Occasionally you would get a woman, presumably a wife or girlfriend, and the name on the account was male. Do you try the has an overdue tape, and hope she doesn't press for details? There was one time, however, where I did get the customer in question. Hello, I am just calling to remind you that you have 5 adult titles that are now overdue. He cut in, yeah, which ones? I tried the adult titles that you rented on. No, what are they? Looking at the list on the screen, there was definitely a theme. I don't remember the titles, so I will simulate them for you. Well, sir, I am showing that you have Anal Intruder 4, Backdoor Vixens, Big Anal Booties, Mad for Anal 7, and Stairway to Anal. Oh, right. How much more a day it is to keep them? It's $1 a day. Okay, he replied. Goodbye, and I hung up. I then turned to my slightly older female coworker who was staring at me, caught between shock and laughter. Why did you read out the titles? He asked me to. Now I am starting to laugh. We would laugh about that phone call for a long time after. I tend to be a fairly broad-minded guy and was so even then while still being rather young, but there was something about the combination of being on the phone with the guy, the titles, and my coworker staring at me while I recited them that was simultaneously embarrassing and hilarious. Years ago, a friend of mine was a manager at an adult shop. At the time, she told me that a guy came in looking for a device that would basically insert his balls back into his person. Lots of other people would come in for crack pipes too, which also wasn't sold in that store. Not a worker, but a customer. I wandered into one and asked for the most embarrassing, inappropriate gag gift to give to a guy at his bachelor's party. Many years ago, somebody told me that you could buy an inflatable sheep at those stores, so I was hoping to find something like that in there. Or maybe a horse rear you could screw, or the world's smallest penis pump. The cashier looked at me very suspiciously and said they didn't sell anything like that. I don't think she believed it was a gag gift. You can buy inflatable sheep at those stores. And I have name unrelated. Well, maybe not. I was in Texas over a decade ago, and it happened to be my buddy's birthday. We ended up getting hammered and a group of us went to a strip club which I was later kicked out of. Different story for a different time. My buddy got separated from the group and ended up back at our hotel, so on the way back from the club we decided to go birthday shopping for him. A few days before, we had seen a sign off the highway for a store called Condoms to Go, which is kind of funny because all of us in the car assumed that condoms were always portable and that using them where you bought them dining in, so to speak, was frowned upon. So we pop in there and boom, it's an erotic store. Perfect. Time to find a gift. By far the best thing on the shelves was an inflatable sheep with a voice box that you'd put at the end of, well, the end, and it would make bar noises when poked. $50 later it was ours, and we went back to the hotel. Buddy with the birthday had already passed out, so we decided to unbox it for him so he could wake up next to his new plastic friend. Here's the happy couple, cuddling. He wakes up in the morning, and is very confused what happened the night before. I would have been too, in that position. Many laughs are had wellsome. We were super hungover, and we hop on our uneventful flight back home. My favorite part of this story is when we get to the airport and we're waiting for our luggage. His duffel bag is one of the first to come down the slide. And I don't know if you know this, but those bags don't drop softly. His came down and smacked the end of the guardrail so hard, it set off the sheep's voice box. Yes, he brought it home to show the wife. So a full flight of people are standing there waiting for the bags, and his starts making a loud bar sound. He runs to his bag, grabs it off the carousel, and immediately runs out of the airport while 60 to 80 people stared in confusion. All in all, I give it a 10 out of 10. Best $50 I've spent in a while. I had a guy who would come in once every 2 weeks or so. He would buy around 10/20 movies and not much else. At least one of the movies would always be a one from our gay section, which always prompted him to explain he was from a state where you couldn't buy porn legally, so he would buy it for multiple friends, one of which happened to be gay. I didn't really care and always just said something like, "That's nice." The best sale I ever had was a man who bought a few movies, a couple fleshlights, and a life-sized fake ass. His ticket came to about $1,300. It was right at the end of the night. I helped him carry it to his car. Yes, the ass was that big, included thighs and part of torso. He left and I closed up for the night. The next day my manager asked about the sale and I told him the story. He informed me the man called and said he bought a couple movies and that was it, and demanded the rest of the charges be removed from his card. He said it was probably a bad case of buyer's remorse. I still got my commission and never heard about it again. I used to work at an adult novelty store. We sold all sorts of things from SFW stuff like jewelry and masks to NSFW stuff like 2-foot-long double-sided dongs. Most folks didn't find the need to make an excuse for what they were buying. There were 3 types of customers. We would have the regulars, usually men in their 60s or older, who would come in for a few DVDs and some enhancement pills. They don't talk much. In and out. We would get the college kids in for a laugh. They'd wander around the store for an hour touching everything and usually leave without buying anything. If they did buy, it was always a gag gift. Then there were the professionals, either performing drag queens, strippers or professional dominatrixes. They were my favorites. They were kind, polite, and always knew exactly what they wanted. One of my girlfriend's first days working at one of these stores, she had a woman come in wearing a full niqab followed by a sheepish-looking husband. The woman boldly stated in a thick local accent, "I need a vibrator because she points at her husband doesn't satisfy me anymore." The husband shrugs in a "that's about right I suppose" kind of way. She says there were a few women who came in who wore the full head-to-toe Islamic clothing and usually wanted good push-up bras etc. to try to give themselves more shape in them. One day my girlfriend and I were horny, and our fingers could only do so much. Since I had recently moved to a new state, I wasn't quite as familiar with the area and I didn't know by memory where the nearest adult store would be located. We relied on my Maps app to take us to our destination. However, it didn't take us to a place where we could buy as many dildos as we could ever want. It instead told me to go into a freaking military base. I ended up pulling up to the gate area where some guys in camo asked us if we had a visitor's pass. I was honest with him and told him, "I have no idea where I am. I'm just following my Maps program and it told me to come here." The young man then asked me where I was going. I tried to respond with a vague answer, but he kept persisting. I'm a bit too awkward to tell this dude where 2 young lesbians were trying to go. Eventually he asked, "Are you looking for the arts and crafts place nearby?" We said yes, and that answer was good enough for him. We turned around and found the right place, which was closed anyways. Skeptical smiley face. My first wife used to sell sex toys. She'd go to conventions with other sex toy sellers and distributors. One of the sellers had a market surrounded by 3 colleges, one of them Ivy League. She said that she had so many college-age women who didn't know how anything worked down there that she started carrying pamphlets for Planned Parenthood. So this is your body, 12 facts about your cycle, and other honest-to-goodness educational materials. Women would ask her medical questions and she'd have to explain what a gynecologist was for. "Honey, I just sell glowing condoms and dildos shaped like tentacled dinosaurs. You need to ask a real medical professional these questions." And this was in 2009. I had a husband come in looking for a vibrator with an extra long handle. He kept insisting longer, longer, longer whenever I showed him a model, so I finally asked why the necessity of length. He told me his wife had really let herself go and he needed a long handle so he wouldn't have to get too close to her. About 5 years ago I wanted a fleshlight. I was single at the time and wasn't getting any. I got the $20 rubber vagina with built-in butthole, too, and walked up to the counter and said, "My brother is getting a divorce. Is this a good gift to celebrate?" Everyone laughed and said it was perfect. I came inside of it like 13 minutes later. It was pretty awesome. Took 12.5 minutes to get home. Huh? I worked at a hospital, but the story is NSFW and he was using a sex toy. As an X-ray tech I saw several weird X-rays. One in particular was an action figure inside a man's rectum. As I handed him the X-rays he says, "Well, I'm sure you saw the X-rays and have questions." Well, I was playing with my daughter in the bathroom and slipped, and I fell right on the dang thing. I remained silent, but my first thought was, why are you playing with your daughter naked? One sticks out in my mind. We had a woman in her 60s to 70s that came in and bought an excessive amount of DVDs. They were all different kinds too. Hetero, homo, fetish, everything. I was so caught off guard I started talking to her about free porn sites. But she said her son prefers DVDs. I must have given her an odd look, so she elaborated and said her son was mentally challenged and had been doing some sexually inappropriate behaviors in the past, so she bought him the movies and no more incidents. I didn't believe her until she came back in a week later. With her son, I spent the next 2 years seeing him every 2 weeks or so. She started coming in and handing me cash and would go sit in the car while he made his selections. He was non-verbal and I'd have to help him pick out the movies and filter for anything that looked particularly aggressive per her request to me. I eventually started keeping DVDs to the side for him and would give him the free promotional DVDs and sample lubes we'd get.